The grand chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled with the light of 1,000 stars. Crystal walls stretched up toward an endless ceiling that showed the live view of swirling galaxies above. 200 alien species sat in rising circles, their eyes all fixed on the small human figure standing at the center of the floor. James Walker wiped his sweaty palms on his diplomatic uniform. Even after 5 years as Earth's ambassador, he still felt tiny in this massive room. The blue and gold Earth insignia on his chest seemed to weigh heavily today. Behind him, Admiral Reed stood like a statue in his black military uniform, face unreadable as always. "And so," James said, his voice carried clearly by the chamber's perfect acoustics, "humanity has successfully developed the theoretical framework for 7-dimensional travel." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the laughter began. It started with the axioms, those tall, crystal-like beings who had mastered 5-dimensional travel thousands of years ago. Their laughter sounded like breaking glass, sharp and cutting. The sound spread through the chamber like a wave. Soon, tentacles, appendages, and various alien limbs were banging on desks and railings in pure amusement. Perhaps came the musical voice of High Counselor Vale of the Axioms. "The humans have confused their dimensions again." Like children counting on their fingers and reaching 13. More laughter followed. James felt his face grow hot, but he kept his diplomatic smile fixed in place. He had expected this reaction. It was part of the plan, after all. Still, the mockery stung. "Our calculations are quite accurate," he replied calmly. "We have mapped the theoretical pathways through all 7 dimensions, including the 2 that your own scientists claim are impossible to access." This brought a fresh wave of laughter. A blob-like being in the 3rd row actually split into 3 parts from shaking so hard. High Counselor Vale rose from his crystalline seat, his transparent body refracting light in complex patterns. "Dear Ambassador Walker," he said in a tone usually reserved for very small children, "our civilization mastered 5-dimensional travel when your species was still throwing spears at each other. We have spent millennia trying to access the 6th and 7th dimensions. They are locked to all known physics." "Perhaps," came a deep voice from behind James, "your physics needs updating." The chamber fell quiet for a moment as Admiral Reed stepped forward. His weathered face and gray hair spoke of experience, and something in his steady gaze made even the axioms pause. "The good Admiral speaks." Vale's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Tell us then, warrior of Earth, how your primitive species has somehow seen what we have missed for thousands of years." Reed's face remained neutral, but James caught the tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Sometimes," Reed said quietly, "fresh eyes see what ancient ones have learned to overlook." This brought the loudest laughter yet. Even the usually stoic rock minds of Centaur were vibrating with amusement. James watched as various alien species wiped tears from their eyes, or equivalent organs, and tried to catch their breath, or whatever they used to breathe. "We will submit our findings to the Council's Science Division," James said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the dying laughter. "We are also prepared to demonstrate." "Enough," Vale interrupted, still chuckling. "We have entertained this delusion long enough. The Council's time is valuable. Perhaps when humanity has mastered basic 5-dimensional mathematics, we can revisit this discussion. In a few hundred years, perhaps." As James and Reed walked out of the chamber, the laughter followed them down the crystalline hallway. 2 junior Axiom diplomats they passed nearly collapsed against each other in giggles. "Well," James muttered once they were alone in the Earth Embassy's secure room, "that went exactly as expected." Reed nodded, finally allowing himself a small smile. "They're so convinced of their superiority, they didn't even scan us properly." He touched the small device in his pocket, which had been recording and analyzing the Axiom's energy signatures the entire time. "Dr. Thompson will find this data very useful." James looked out the window at the massive Axiom ships floating in the space around the Council station. Their 5-dimensional drives bent reality in beautiful ways, letting them partially exist in multiple spaces at once. They really have no idea, do they? He asked. No, Reed replied, his smile growing slightly wider. And that's exactly how we want it. For now. 2 kilometers beneath the Pacific Ocean's surface, Dr. Anna Thompson stared at the massive screen displaying real-time calculations. The numbers flowed like a digital waterfall, each one confirming what humanity had discovered 3 years ago. The universe had more secrets than the axioms knew. Deep Station Alpha hummed around her, its reinforced walls holding back the crushing ocean pressure. The facility stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, but most of its space was dedicated to a single project. In the main hangar bay, partially hidden behind layers of experimental shielding, sat humanity's greatest achievement, the Infinity's Edge. Dr. Thompson called out Mark Evans, her chief engineer. The latest data from the council meeting is coming in. Anna walked over to his station, her footsteps echoing on the metal floor. The screen showed energy readings from the Axiom ships, secretly recorded by Admiral Reed's scanning device. She smiled as she studied the patterns. They haven't changed anything in 1,000 years, she said, shaking her head. They're still using the same 5-dimensional configurations they developed when we were building pyramids. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Director Thomas walked in. His usual neat appearance was slightly rumpled, suggesting he'd been up all night monitoring the council meeting. The axioms took the bait, he announced to the room. They think we're fumbling in the dark with dimensional theory. Ambassador Walker played his part perfectly. Anna nodded, remembering how this all started. 3 years ago, she had been studying quantum mechanics when she noticed something everyone else had missed. The universe didn't work in the way the axioms claimed. Their 5-dimensional mastery had made them blind to bigger possibilities. "Show me the ship," Director Thomas said. Anna led him to the observation deck overlooking the main hangar. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the Infinity's Edge in all its glory. The ship looked deceptively simple from the outside. A sleek, dark hull shaped like a teardrop. But its true nature existed in dimensions that normal eyes couldn't see. "How sure are we about the drive?" Thomas asked, his voice quiet. "We've run over 10,000 simulations," Anna replied. "The 7-dimensional drive works perfectly. We can move through spaces the axioms don't even know exist." She touched a control panel, and a holographic display sprang to life between them. It showed a simplified version of dimensional space, the 3 normal dimensions as a cube, the 4th as time flowing through it, and the 5th that the axioms use to perform their impossible feats. "But here," she said, manipulating the display, "are the 6th and 7th dimensions." The hologram twisted in ways that hurt the eyes. "The axioms think these are locked, unchangeable. They've been saying that for so long, they stopped looking for ways to unlock them." Director Thomas watched as she demonstrated how the Infinity's Edge could move through these higher dimensions. "And they won't be able to track us. They can't track what they can't perceive," Anna said with a smile. "It's like trying to watch a television signal with a thermometer." The room's lights suddenly pulsed blue. The signal they'd been waiting for. Admiral Reed's ship had just docked at the surface station above them. "Time to brief the Admiral," Director Thomas said. "He'll want to know everything is ready." Anna took one last look at the Infinity's Edge. The ship represented humanity's greatest gamble. While the axioms and other aliens had laughed at Earth's supposed primitive understanding of science, humans had been quietly leaping ahead. They hadn't been bound by thousands of years of assumptions about what was possible. "Send the final diagnostic reports to my tablet," she told Mark, "and make sure the drive is charged. Something tells me we'll be needing it soon." As she gathered her materials for the briefing, one of the junior scientists rushed up to her. "Dr. Thompson, we're picking up unusual activity from the Axiom fleet. They're mobilizing ships near their home world." Anna exchanged looks with Director Thomas. They both knew what this meant. The axioms weren't just dismissing humanity anymore. They were starting to worry. And worried empires often did stupid things. "Well," she said, straightening her lab coat, "let's go tell Admiral Reed that his performance at the council worked a little too well. The axioms are about to give us the perfect reason to test our ship." The first sign of the invasion came as a ripple in the air above New York City. The sky seemed to fold in on itself, and suddenly a massive axiom warship appeared, its crystalline structure catching the morning sunlight. Within seconds, similar ships materialized above every major city on Earth. In the United Nations Emergency Chamber, screens showed the same scene playing out worldwide. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi, everywhere, the crystal ships hung in the sky like beautiful but deadly jewels. "They didn't even warn us," someone whispered. Ambassador Walker stood at the center of the chamber, his face grim. The same aliens who had laughed at him 3 days ago were now here to protect the galaxy from humanity's ambitions. On the main screen, High Counselor Vale's transparent form shimmered as he made his announcement. "People of Earth," Vale's voice rang out across all communications channels. "Your recent claims of dimensional advancement have forced us to act. We cannot risk your primitive understanding causing damage to the fabric of space-time. This intervention is for your own good." The first attacks came moments later. 5-dimensional energy beams struck military bases around the world. The weapons seemed to ignore all defenses, passing through shields and bunkers as if they weren't there. Traditional weapons fired back, but the axiom ships simply shifted slightly out of normal spacetime, letting the missiles and bullets pass harmlessly through them. In Deep Station Alpha, Dr. Thompson and her team watched the attack unfold on their monitors. Instead of panic, there was an air of focused concentration in the control room. "They're using standard 5-dimensional attack patterns," she noted, studying the data flowing across her screen. "Exactly what we expected." Admiral Reed's voice came through the secure channel. "Status of the Infinity's Edge. Ready and waiting," Anna replied. "Are you sure we should let them think they've won first? The bigger their confidence, the harder they'll fall," Reed answered. "Let them think their intervention is succeeding." Above ground, the situation looked increasingly desperate. The axiom ships had disabled most of Earth's military capabilities within the first hour. Their crystal ships now hung lower in the sky, their presence a clear show of dominance. High Counselor Vale appeared again on global broadcasts. His crystalline form seemed to sparkle with satisfaction. "Your resistance has been noted and dismissed," he announced. "Earth is now under axiom protection. Your dimensional research will cease. Your military will disarm. This is not a negotiation." In the UN chamber, James Walker waited for exactly the right moment. When Vale finished his speech, James stepped forward and activated his communication link to the Axiom command ship. "High Counselor," he said, letting a slight tremor enter his voice, "we request time to discuss terms of surrender." Vale's laughter echoed through the chamber. "Discuss? There is nothing to discuss, Ambassador. You will submit, or we will demonstrate why challenging your betters was a mistake." "Please," James continued, playing his part perfectly. "Give us 1 hour to inform all Earth governments." "You have 30 minutes, Vale replied dismissively. "Use them wisely." As the communication ended, James pressed a hidden button on his sleeve. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a light turned green in the control room of Deep Station Alpha. "That's the signal," Director Thomas announced. "Dr. Thompson, power up the drive." Anna's fingers flew across her control panel. In the massive hangar, the Infinity's Edge hummed to life. Energy readings that no axiom sensor could detect began to build. "They think they've won," Anna said, watching as the ship's 7-dimensional drive core began to spin up. "They think we're about to surrender. That's their problem." Admiral Reed's voice came through again. "They think they know everything about how the universe works. They're about to learn differently." As the axiom ships settled into victory formation above Earth's cities, none of them detected the impossible energy signature building under the Pacific Ocean. Their sensors, limited to 5 dimensions, couldn't perceive the ripples of seven-dimensional power that were about to change everything. The 30 minutes of surrender preparation time were actually a countdown, not to Earth's submission, but to the moment when humanity would show the galaxy what true dimensional mastery looked like. The countdown reached 5 minutes. In Deep Station Alpha's control room, Dr. Anna Thompson ran the final checks on the seven-dimensional drive. Around her, screens showed the Axiom fleet still hovering victoriously above Earth's cities, their crystal ships gleaming in the sunlight. "All systems are green," Mark reported from his station. "The drive is running at optimal levels." Anna nodded, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "Beginning final power sequence." "Admiral Reed, are you in position?" "Affirmative." Reed's voice came through. He had quietly boarded the Infinity's Edge 10 minutes ago. "The Axioms are still broadcasting their victory speeches. They have no idea what's coming." The ship sat in its massive underwater hangar, its dark hull seeming to absorb the light around it. But to Anna's specially designed sensors, it was blazing with seven-dimensional energy. The drive core spun faster and faster, touching spaces in reality that the Axioms had deemed impossible to reach. 2 minutes, Director Thomas announced. "Dr. Thompson, start the emergence sequence." Anna input the commands. Above them, massive doors in the ocean floor began to open. Water rushed in, filling the hangar bay. But the Infinity's Edge was already generating its protective field. The ship's systems, designed to operate in dimensions beyond normal space, weren't bothered by something as simple as ocean pressure. 1 minute, Mark called out. "Drive stability at 100%. In the United Nations chamber, Ambassador Walker was still pretending to organize Earth's surrender. High Counselor Vale's huge hologram loomed over the room, his crystalline form radiating smugness. 30 seconds remain, Vale announced. "I hope you have made peace with your new reality." James checked his watch and allowed himself a small smile. "Oh, we have. Just not the reality you're thinking of." The countdown reached 0. In Deep Station Alpha, Anna pressed the final activation sequence. "Infinity's Edge, you are go for launch. Show them what humanity can really do." The ship rose through the ocean, but not in any way normal physics would allow. Instead of pushing through the water, it simply shifted around it, existing partially in higher dimensions where the ocean wasn't present. To ordinary eyes, it would have looked like parts of the ship were disappearing and reappearing, the hull flickering between spaces that shouldn't exist. "By all the stars," Mark whispered, watching his readings. "It's working even better than the simulations." The Infinity's Edge broke the ocean's surface, water falling away from its impossible hull. It rose into the air near one of the Axiom warships hovering over the Pacific. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Axiom ship's sensors finally detected something their operators couldn't understand. Alarms blared across their fleet as they tried to analyze the human vessel that seemed to exist in places their instruments said nothing could exist. In the ship's command center, Admiral Reed sat in the captain's chair. "Send the message, Dr. Thompson." Anna activated the communication systems. Across every channel the Axioms were using, her voice rang out clear and confident. "Attention Axiom Fleet. You are observing humanity's first seven-dimensional vessel, the Infinity's Edge. Your sensors can only detect about 30% of its actual structure. The rest exists in dimensions you can't perceive." In the UN chamber, James watched with satisfaction as Vale's hologram flickered, the High Counselor's crystalline form showing the first signs of fear. "Impossible," Vale whispered. "The 6th and 7th dimensions are locked. They cannot be accessed." Reed's voice cut in. "That's the problem with thinking you know everything. You stop looking for new answers." To demonstrate his point, the Infinity's Edge began to move. But it didn't move like any ship the Axioms had ever seen. Instead of traveling through space, it seemed to fold space around itself. It flickered in and out of reality, appearing at different points simultaneously, existing in ways that made the Axiom's 5-dimensional technology look primitive. "Beautiful," Anna breathed, watching the readings. The ship was performing perfectly, its movements through seven-dimensional space as graceful as a dancer. Ready for the next phase, Admiral. Indeed, Reed replied, his hands resting calmly on the control panel. Let's show our Axiom friends what happens when you underestimate humanity. High Counselor Vale ordered his fleet to attack the moment he recovered from his shock. 20 Axiom warships turned their five-dimensional weapons toward the Infinity's edge. Crystal energy beams lanced out, twisting through multiple dimensions to strike their target. They hit nothing but empty space. Did you really think? Admiral Reed's voice echoed through their communications, that weapons designed for 5 dimensions could touch a ship that exists in 7. The Infinity's edge flickered and reappeared simultaneously in 3 different locations. The Axiom sensors went crazy, trying to track a vessel that moved through dimensional spaces their systems couldn't even detect. In Deep Station Alpha's control room, Dr. Thompson watched the readings with satisfaction. The Axioms are firing their weapons through the exact dimensional corridors we predicted, she told her team. They haven't changed their combat tactics in 1,000 years. On her main screen, she could see what the Axioms couldn't, the complex 7-dimensional pattern the Infinity's edge was weaving through space, while the alien ships could only move up and down through dimensions 1 through 5. Humanity's vessel moved in directions that didn't even have names yet. Their shields are still configured for 5-dimensional attacks, Mark reported from his station. Should we show them what a 7-dimensional weapon can do? Anna nodded. Admiral Reed, you're cleared for weapons demonstration. In the Infinity's Edge's command center, Reed pressed a single button. The ship's primary weapon activated, but it didn't fire a beam or launch a missile. Instead, it created a 7-dimensional fold in space directly inside an Axiom warship's engine room. The crystal ship didn't explode. Instead, 1/3 of it simply ceased to exist. The space it occupied folded into dimensions its matter couldn't survive in. The remaining pieces drifted apart, their perfect crystalline structure now looking like a broken mirror. Panic spread through the Axiom fleet. Their mighty warships, which had never been defeated in 5-dimensional combat, began to break formation. Some tried to escape using their dimensional drives, but they could only flee through the 5 dimensions they knew. The Infinity's edge was waiting for them in the spaces they couldn't see. In the UN chamber, Ambassador Walker watched Vale's hologram flicker wildly as the High Counselor tried to comprehend what was happening. How? Vale demanded, his crystalline form trembling. How did you achieve this? We tried to tell you, James replied calmly. Humans see patterns others miss. While you were laughing at our primitive understanding, we were looking at dimensions you never thought to explore. Above London, an Axiom ship attempted to fire its most powerful weapon. The Infinity's Edge responded by shifting the weapon's beam through the 7th dimension, causing it to emerge from the back of the Axiom vessel instead. The crystal ship's own attack phased through its hull, leaving geometric patterns of destruction. Admiral, Anna's voice came through to the bridge. Their ships are attempting to regroup using 5-dimensional coordination signals. Reed smiled. Let's show them why that's a mistake. The Infinity's Edge moved in ways that made reality itself seem to hiccup. It existed in multiple places, not just in space, but in dimensional phases that the Axioms couldn't even perceive. Their fleet's formation broke apart completely as ships tried to dodge attacks coming from dimensional angles they couldn't see or understand. In Deep Station Alpha, Director Thomas watched the tactical display with quiet pride. Send the signal to all Earth Defense Forces, he ordered. Operation Revelation is proceeding as planned. The Axiom ships were now in full retreat, their perfect crystal forms scratched and damaged by encounters with forces they had deemed impossible. Their sensors, designed to monitor 5 dimensions, were overwhelmed by readings they couldn't interpret. Should we pursue them? Anna asked, her fingers hovering over the controls. No need, Reed replied. They've seen enough for now. Let them run back to their council and report that the primitive humans have mastered dimensional travel beyond their understanding. Let them remember this day as the moment they learned that mockery has consequences. The Infinity's edge hung in the sky above Earth, its dark hull shifting slightly through multiple dimensions, a silent reminder that humanity had not only caught up to the galaxy's oldest civilizations, but had surpassed them in ways they never imagined possible. The remains of the Axiom fleet hung in Earth's orbit like broken crystal sculptures. High Counselor Vale's voice had lost all its previous mockery when he called for an emergency communication. "You have made your point," Vale's hologram said in the UN chamber. His crystalline form seemed dimmer now, the sparkle of superiority gone from his presence. "We will withdraw our forces immediately." Ambassador Walker glanced at his tablet, where Dr. Thompson had just sent him an update. The Infinity's edge was currently existing in 3 different dimensional phases, simultaneously, monitoring the Axiom ships from angles they couldn't detect. "Withdraw," James replied, letting a small smile cross his face. "Of course. But first, let's discuss the terms of your retreat." Vale's hologram flickered in what might have been anger or fear. "Terms. We are the Axioms. We do not accept terms from the species that just proved we understand dimensions better than you." James interrupted. "I think you'll find that the old rules no longer apply." In Deep Station Alpha's control room, Anna watched the exchange on her monitors while coordinating with the Infinity's edge. "Admiral Reed, are you ready with the quantum markers?" "Already prepared." Reed's voice came through. The ship had been manufacturing 7-dimensional quantum tracking devices during the entire battle. Every Axiom ship in range has been tagged. They just don't know it yet. The quantum markers were perhaps humanity's most elegant creation. Tiny 7-dimensional beacons that could be attached to 5-dimensional matter. The Axioms couldn't detect them, couldn't shield against them, and couldn't remove them without understanding the higher dimensions they operated in. "Your ships may leave Earth's space," James continued addressing Vale, "but know that we can find them anywhere they go. The Infinity's edge has already marked each vessel with technology you cannot detect or understand." Vale's hologram sparked with alarm. "You're bluffing. Such tracking would be impossible across interstellar distances. Would you like a demonstration?" James asked quietly. He nodded to Anna's image on his secure screen. In Deep Station Alpha, Anna pressed a sequence of commands. The quantum markers activated, sending their signals through the 7th dimension. On the main display, every Axiom ship lit up like a beacon, visible even through their most advanced cloaking technology. "Sending the feed to your sensors now, High Counselor," James said. On Vale's command ship, screens suddenly showed the positions of every Axiom vessel in a 100 light-year radius, including ships that were supposed to be hidden in classified locations. The silence that followed was profound. What do you want?" Vale finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Reed spoke up from the Infinity's edge. "First, you will return to your council and admit that you attacked Earth without provocation. Second, all Axiom technology and research will be shared freely with Earth scientists. Third, you will publicly acknowledge that humanity has achieved dimensional mastery beyond your understanding. And if we refuse?" The Infinity's edge shifted slightly, moving through spaces the Axioms couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, every crystal ship in orbit felt a slight vibration, the touch of 7-dimensional energy passing through their hulls. "Then we demonstrate what 7-dimensional warfare really means," Reed replied calmly. "Your ships are already tagged. We can find them anywhere, at any time. Think carefully about your next move, High Counselor." In Deep Station Alpha, Mark looked up from his console. "Dr. Thompson, the quantum markers are showing the Axiom ships preparing for emergency dimensional jumps." Anna nodded. "Let them run. Every jump they make will just prove that they can't hide from us anymore." One by one, the crystal ships vanished from normal space, fleeing through their 5-dimensional corridors. The Infinity's edge remained in Earth orbit, its dark hull rippling with 7-dimensional energy, while on the tracking display, every Axiom ship remained clearly visible despite their retreat. Send the message to all Earth governments. Director Thomas ordered. The immediate crisis is over. But our real work is just beginning. James watched the last Axiom ship disappear and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. How quickly the mighty fall, he murmured, when they forget that laughter can turn to fear in the space between dimensions. 1 month after the Axiom retreat, Ambassador James Walker once again stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber. This time, there was no laughter. The crystalline walls seemed dimmer, and the alien representatives sat in complete silence as they watched him. The Axiom seats were conspicuously empty. After their failed invasion of Earth, they had withdrawn from public appearances. Reports said their ships now traveled in large groups, constantly checking for 7-dimensional signatures they couldn't understand. Members of the Council, James began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 1 month ago, you laughed when I spoke of human achievements in dimensional science. Today, I return not with theories, but with proof. He nodded to Dr. Thompson, who stood beside him where Admiral Reed had been before. She activated a small device on her wrist, and the chamber sensors suddenly went wild. Outside the Council station, the Infinity's edge appeared. But it didn't arrive like other ships. Instead, it seemed to phase into existence through angles that made the Council members' eyes hurt. The ship hung in space, its dark hull shifting between dimensions, making reality itself seem to ripple around it. By the ancient stars, whispered a member of the rock mines, their usually stoic voice trembling. The reports were true. Anna stepped forward, her tablet displaying complex 7-dimensional readings. The universe has more secrets than any of us imagined, she said. While you were convinced that certain dimensions were locked, we looked at the problem differently. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries come from minds unburdened by centuries of assumptions. The Council's own sensors were going haywire, trying to analyze a ship that existed partially in dimensions they couldn't detect. Several alien species had to shut down their scanning devices completely to prevent them from burning out. The Axioms have already experienced what our technology can do, James continued. They learned that mocking others for their supposed primitive understanding can be a dangerous mistake. But humanity doesn't seek revenge or dominance. We seek partnership. He gestured, and holographic displays appeared around the chamber, showing the basics of 7-dimensional theory in ways the Council members could understand. We offer this knowledge freely, Anna explained, to any species willing to approach it with an open mind. The universe is vast, and there are likely dimensions beyond even the 7th that we haven't discovered yet. We can explore them together. From the Infinity's edge, Admiral Reed's voice carried through the chamber's communication system. As a show of good faith, we've already begun sharing our findings with those Axiom scientists who were willing to admit they had more to learn. Their understanding of crystal-based technology, combined with our grasp of higher dimensions, has opened up possibilities neither of us could have achieved alone. The Council chamber erupted in excited discussions. Species that had looked down on humanity just a month ago were now practically falling over themselves to propose joint research projects. There will be new protocols, of course, James added firmly. Earth will no longer tolerate the mockery or dismissal we once faced. We've proven that age doesn't always equal wisdom, and that sometimes the youngest species can see what the oldest have overlooked. In Deep Station Alpha, Director Thomas watched the Council feed with satisfaction. On his screens, he could see the status of 3 more Infinity-class vessels under construction. Humanity had no plans to become the bullies they had once faced, but they would never again be underestimated. Consider this a new dawn, James concluded to the Council. A time when we all acknowledge that the universe holds more mysteries than any of us can imagine alone. The laughter has stopped, but in its place, we offer something better: respect, cooperation, and the promise of discoveries that even 7 dimensions cannot contain. The chamber filled with approving sounds from 100 alien species. Outside, the Infinity's edge continued its silent dance through multiple dimensions, a reminder that humanity had not only caught up to the galaxy's oldest civilizations, but had surpassed them by simply daring to question what everyone else had accepted as impossible. The age of mockery was over. The age of discovery had begun.